Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our side event, joint side event with the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution and UNEP in collaboration with LABRI, the Battery Partnership, and the Center for Regional Basel Convention for Latin America. So my name is Maria Paula Lia from the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, and today I have the pleasure to have a number of distinguished panelists with us and speakers. And I thank you also to the participants online, and I know it's very late for many of us, and I know we are competing with many side events here, and the plenary and contact groups are still going on, so thank you for being here. And we have only 1 hour for this panel, so in the interest of time, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Abiola Olanipekun, Chief of Science and Technical Assistance Branch of the BRS Secretariat, for the welcome remarks. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you very much, Maria. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm very pleased to provide these opening remarks on behalf of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention Secretariat. And I want to thank the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution for organizing this side event. Following the 2022 decision by the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention, we continue to advance the work on update of the technical guidelines on the environmentally sound management of waste lead-acid batteries and the development of a technical guidance on ESM of other batteries. This decision was adopted in response to the challenges related to the growing generation of waste lead-acid batteries reported in several countries, and also because of the importance of batteries recycling in the transition to a low-carbon economy. There is consolidated scientific evidence of the capacity of lead to travel very far from the area where lead contamination occurred, jointly with its poisonous effects on human health and the environment. The 2019 International Lead Association dataset verified that approximately 86% of total global lead consumption goes directly into producing lead-acid batteries, which shows that the inappropriate handling of this type of batteries is possibly the most important source of lead pollution in the world. Informal processing of waste lead-acid batteries exposes workers to lead poisoning, regardless of age and sex, from acid leaching to extraction of lead from batteries, and during the dumping of contaminated parts. Lead exposure has very toxic to lethal effects on humans. For instance, it affects the intellectual capacity of children and impairs the development of fetuses. 18 million children in the world are engaged in child labor in the industrial processing sector, of which batteries processing is a subsector. These children face lead exposure risk that can devastatingly impact their growth and development. This is of particular concern when the projections show an increase of 70% in employment in the industrial sector by 2030. The Basel Convention, in addition to updating the technical guidelines on ESM of waste lead-acid batteries, developed several tools, parties and stakeholders to manage the WLAB in an environmentally sound manner. For example, the development of a WLAB inventory toolkit and a checklist to assess ESM standard criteria of recycling facilities. Also, a set of manuals to implement ESM frameworks, including examples of financing strategies, implementation of extended producer responsibility policy systems, and strategies to work with the informal sector are also available. Deploying existing tools to enhance the environmentally sound management of waste lead-acid batteries is critical to drive transformation and improvements. Through knowledge sharing platforms like we have during this side event, we scale actionable solutions to eliminate lead pollution and protect human health and the ecosystems. This collaborative approach is very, very important and essential to delivering on our commitment under the Basel Convention and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In closing, I want to thank you all for your vital participation in today's side event. I trust that our discussions today will again underscore that the environmentally sound management of waste lead-acid batteries requires immediate, coordinated global action. And I urge you to carry these insights back to your respective countries, championing the policies and the frameworks necessary to turn today's dialogue into tomorrow's standard practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abiola, for setting the scene and what we can do globally for such a big challenge, which is, common to many countries where we work in and collaborate with. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Michaela Paun, Program Management Officer of UNEP Chemicals and Health Branch. She will deliver opening remarks on UNEP behalf, but also we will have the pleasure to hear your presentation on a policy, various policy options across various countries and initiatives. The floor is yours. You have 8 minutes for your presentation and 5 for the welcome remarks.
Okay, thank you, Maria Paula. It's no pressure. I mean, I feel
Without pressure.
I'm not feeling pressured. Just to say that I will deliver this opening remarks on behalf of our Chief of Branch, Ms. Jacqueline Alvarez, who unfortunately was not able to join us today. But thank you so much for joining us for this event. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to our partners and collaborators that agreed to take part to this event, and here BRS Secretariat, Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, BCRC Argentina, but also Partnership for Battery Action and Lead Acid Battery Recycling Initiative. It was mentioned by Abiola earlier that lead exposure remains one of the most significant environmental health challenges of our time. And despite we knew about its impacts for now, I think it's decades, right? Lead continues to be to affect millions of people worldwide, particularly children. And we have heard also that is causing irreversible damage to health, development, and well-being. And yes, as Abiola mentioned, used lead acid batteries remain one of the largest sources of anthropogenic lead in circulation globally. I think we all know that these batteries are providing important services and support economic development. But their collection, recycling, disposal, especially when undertaken under informal or poorly controlled conditions, can result in severe contamination of community, workplaces, and the environment. And basically, this is precisely why the environmentally sound management of waste lead acid batteries is so important. I think it sits at the intersection of chemicals management, waste management, public health, circularity, and development. It also is directly relevant to objective of the Basel Convention and the efforts of you as parties, right, to minimize the generation of hazardous waste and to ensure that it is environmentally sound managed. At the same time, I think this discussion comes as a particularly important moment for international chemicals and waste agenda. You all heard, and you know by now, the adoption of global framework on chemicals provided us a renewed platform for collective action to prevent harm from chemicals and waste throughout their entire life cycle. And recognizing the continued global burden posed by lead, I think it's good for you to know a proposal has been put forward for lead to be considered as one of the issues of concern under this global framework on chemicals. I think such recognition will help mobilize greater attention, cooperation, and actions across sectors and stakeholders, while complementing ongoing efforts under the existing multilateral environmental agreements like Basel Convention and other national initiatives. As we look ahead, the first international conference under this framework, it comes in November this year, And I would like to encourage countries and stakeholders to engage actively in these discussions as well, and support the strengthening the global action, as Abiola also mentioned it, on lead pollution, addressing lead pollution and exposure. And I think this event today will showcase some practical solutions, from policy development to innovative tools and monitoring approaches. And it will demonstrate that we have the solutions, right? But I think it's a matter of how do we, it's a matter of scaling them up, right? To help us deliver significant benefits for human health and the environment. And I look forward for today's discussion and to learning from the experience and innovations that will be shared today. And I also invite you to engage with questions or experiences. Thank you. Okay, so it's still me.
It's still you with your presentation.
Okay, so I promise this will be my last intervention today. But yes, so my presentation today focus on the policy aspects of reducing lead contamination across sectors. And yeah, it was mentioned by Abiola earlier, 86% of the total global lead use is used in batteries. And basically remain one of the most widely collected waste streams globally. I think the process in which batteries are recycling can be sometimes very harmful and hazardous if not proper managed, and can pose significant threats for human health and environment. Therefore, I think a coordinated governance and engagement with the lead battery sector and other stakeholders are critical for reducing lead contamination and associated health risk. Next slide. So why I'm talking about this? In UNEP we have an initiative that is co-funded by the European Union. And part of this initiative we are supposed to develop, we had to develop an assessment in the framework of this initiative. And this evening I will provide you a bit of a brief overview of this approach that we have taken and what are the key findings when we look at different policy options that exist and that could be picked up and integrated in different national, regional contexts. Next slide, please. So how did we do this? So we look across, so we try to use a comprehensive systematic approach to complete this policy analysis with the aim of producing a list of policy solutions that are informed by both scientific evidence but also applied experience. The approach included an extensive literature review of different peer review studies, as well as different reports from UNEP, WHO, World Bank, and other specialized NGOs. We also held comprehensive regional consultations and targeted individual interviews. And lastly, we did a comparative assessment of different regional or national policies as to add up to this assessment. Next slide, please. So now focusing on the key findings, what type of policy instruments are there and could be further scaled up, or an uptake could happen. So we have categorized them in three types here, as you see on these slides. So regulatory instruments are mandatory measures established by laws or other subsidiary type of legislation. This includes bans or phase out of lead products, limits the allowable lead levels in products, and the environmental permitting or licensing requirements for facilities that to control worker exposure, releases to environment, and controls on the international movement of hazardous waste. Also, the second category that we have here are economic and market-based instruments that are used to incentivize and to encourage safer practices and alternatives. So here examples include taxes and lead-containing products, deposit refund systems for lead-acid batteries, extended producer responsibility schemes that hold manufacturer accountable, and so on and so forth. And I think the third category looks at the informational or voluntary type of instruments that promote transparency and cooperation. So, and this includes like lead content labels or certification, public reporting on this type of emission, voluntary industry commitments, and digital passport products that could track the lead throughout its life cycle. What we basically concluded is that no single policy instrument is sufficient on its own. So I think that there should be, integrated policy approaches are needed to support the transition towards a less safe and sustainable economy. So for example, when considering the significant and environmental health risk associated with lead battery sector, regulatory measures can establish minimum health and safety standards, economic measures can create incentives for the safe collection and recycling, and information tools can promote greater transparency and accountability. So you see, they're combining them. I think we have stronger approach towards minimization of the lead pollution and exposure. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think we also look at what are the remaining challenges, right? So despite the progress, there are several barriers that are still there. We see that many countries, they have regulations, but they lack technical capacity, lab capacity, infrastructure, or surveillance systems to ensure effectiveness, implementation, and enforcement of that legislation. And something else that we have observed across different regions around the world is that governance structures, they are often fragmented. So responsibilities for addressing lead pollution and exposure are spread across multiple ministries and agencies, including environment, health, economic, custom, trade ministries, and so on. And this fragmented environment, right, or fragmented responsibility with weak links between these ministries and agencies lead to limited coordinated action. And second type of barrier that we have identified, multi-sectoral coordination remains limited. So I think this happens in some settings, but still in other settings we see lack of engagement from academia, industry, civil society, and so on and so forth. And I think this is a pity because I think coming all together we can find solution and can leverage expertise and innovation and resources. Third barrier is like critical data gaps, right? So harmonized and comparable information as well as different assessments are not there most of the time, making it difficult to understand the national exposure scenarios. And basically this, how should I say, inhibits the prioritization of intervention, which is key while we have so many competing priorities at the national level. And fourth, there are significant technical capacity gaps. We have seen throughout our consultation that there is lab capacity, limited equipment or no equipment, no capacity of the personnel to perform the monitoring exercise. So I think cross-cutting across all these barriers is the financing aspect, right? Because limited resources constraints, surveillance constraints, enforcement, training, custom control, and site remediation and formalization, for example, of lead-acid battery recycling activities where most things happen in informal setting. Next slide. So coming to the so based on all these regional consultations that we have held, expert interviews, but also this review of evidence, a clear message emerged. Reducing the lead exposure requires an integrated, holistic, multi-sectoral approach that prioritize prevention and evidence-based action throughout formalized mechanisms, right? That are tailored to sectors, but also to national context. And here I put some recommendation. So first, countries should establish and enforce mandatory regulatory frameworks, right? At the same time, regional organizations can play an important role in harmonizing standards across countries. And I have an example on this, but not on the batteries, but on the lead in paint, where, for example, ECOWAS region has formalized at the regional level limiting the lead in paint across the ECOWAS region, which then became mandatory for all countries, members of ECOWAS. So that is a good example that could be replicated, for example, in the case of dealing with the batteries. And then I think effective regulation must be supported by, as I said earlier, by the robust enforcement and compliance mechanism. And then we talked about the informal sector. I think most of, over 50% of the batteries end up in informal sector, which is huge problem that we still need to deal with it, and we need to find solution to that. There are some other priorities that I put here, maybe just to stay with the allocated time. I will not go in depth in each of every. Strengthening data system and surveillance, it's as important as the others. But global action, as Abiola mentioned earlier, is needed to prevent transboundary movement, for example, of hazardous waste. And we need to understand that this is not only a national problem, it's a regional problem, a global problem, because this is part of an entire supply chain. And therefore, I think there should be some kind of engagement and discussion in the regional context and harmonization of legislation and regulation. And not least, of course, the financing aspect. It's clear without finance and investments, it's very complicated to basically apply all these recommendations. Next slide. So just to conclude, here I put some other additional recommendations that we have identified. Maybe just to browse a bit to it, I think I have mentioned that we need to understand the dynamics of formal and informal recycling in the country, as well as the transboundary movements happening. This is key for implementing evidence-informed intervention, of course. We have a lot of technical guidance. We have also Basel guidance that are there for us, but I think there should be an uptake of this guidance and translation into enforceable regulation standards that address the full life cycle of battery management. And not least, I think I mentioned before this coordination among the relevant stakeholders, ministries, agencies at the country level is as important, because they are all part of the same story and they need to work together to address this. So I think that is my last slide. So I hope I stayed in the 8 minutes time, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Almost on time. Well done. So with that overview on global policy, I think we all agree that multi-stakeholder coordination is essential, whether it's within a country or regional. And we want now to look into a country reality and a project example, so that we see how that bigger lens and overview you provided might translate or not into a project and scoping study that we are having. And so I'm pleased to have with us Beth Anderson, Program Manager from Library. You also have 8 minutes And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists for the work that's gone into this event. So my name is Beth Anderson. I'm the Programme Manager at LABRY, which is the Lead Acid Battery Recycling Initiative. Now, at LABRY, we are focused on providing advice and technical assistance to governments to design and implement policies that address unsafe lead-acid battery recycling. So we, as I say, we focus exclusively on lead-acid batteries, and that's because, as Abiola and Mihaela touched on, this is such a big contributor to lead exposure. The bottom bullet point there has the statistic that over a third of global lead exposure is attributable to unsafe used lead-acid battery recycling, so a very, very large amount. And at LABRY, we have a few different activities. So we start with market scoping, which involves understanding the current situation with how batteries are recycled, but also why they're recycled in that way, so what the incentives are. We then use that as a basis to work with governments to design policies that combat that and that take international best practice and tailor it to the national context. And then we will work with governments as well to monitor the effects of these policies. And for this talk, I'll focus just on market scoping. So market scoping involves a few different activities. Firstly, we will interview stakeholders throughout the whole supply chain. So right from the battery manufacturers through to the retailers that sell batteries, the scrap dealers that collect them, the smelters, the exporters. And we'll be looking to understand their activities, but also the incentives and the dynamics of what they do. We will then look at recycler safety and look in detail at the processes and the risks involved. We will then, thirdly, map the policy landscape, so working with governments and NGOs to understand work that's already been done on used lead-acid battery regulation and any challenges or opportunities involved in that. And then finally, we will synthesize those findings to present some policy options to policymakers and use that to discuss what the most appropriate solution for that context would be. So I'd like to share a few lessons from some of these studies that we've done. We've now done 6 of these studies in different countries and learned a few things along the way. So one to mention is that recycling encompasses lots of different activities, and those will be more or less common and different in different markets. To give an example, in Malawi, we found that repairing batteries is quite common, and you'll have small informal actors repairing cells and extending the life of batteries. Whereas in Georgia and in the Philippines, there are lots of facilities that will smelt lead into ingots and sell those. And obviously, just to name the solution that will work for addressing this will depend on the structure of the market. And then secondly, another learning is it's very common that unsafe recyclers will outcompete safer recyclers. So they're not paying these relatively unsafe or unsafe recyclers are not paying for safety equipment, and so they can offer higher prices for batteries, which makes it difficult for safer facilities to survive. The exact detail of that will depend on the country. So there are some examples on the slide, but sometimes it's all happening within a regulated market, and there'll be safe and unsafe facilities competing. but other times the formal regulated facilities are competing with informal and unregulated ones. Then thirdly, we've learned just how many different stakeholders are involved in this issue. So I think this is something that all of the panelists have touched on, but even looking within government alone, you might have the customs department who's responsible for cross-border flows of batteries. Maybe the Department of Industry is issuing permits to the businesses. Department of Health is dealing with the human health effects of lead exposure. The Department of Environment might have overall oversight of regulation. And then you might have provincial authorities that are regulating the local facilities in their area. And it, of course, is very, very important, and we make sure to engage with each of these stakeholders so we fully understand their perspective and their mandate, and we can take that into account when we're evaluating policy options. And then finally, we have found that a particularly flexible approach is important. So as has been said, a lot of ULAB recycling is informal and is undocumented, but it is still possible to systematically collect data. One thing that we found works well is to follow the leads along the supply chain. So we will start at the very start of the supply chain, at the more visible part, maybe asking retailers that are selling lead acid batteries, do you collect used lead acid batteries? Where do you sell them to? And if they say, oh, the scrap dealer down the road, we will then visit that scrap dealer, ask the same question again, and follow that used lead acid battery until it reaches the end of the chain to be smelted, to be exported. We have also thought very carefully about how we can build trust with the stakeholders that we're working with. So we are asking for sensitive information around price, and we will make sure that we work each time with local researchers to carefully frame questions to ask interviewees and really make sure that we're establishing strong relationships that can enable rich conversations. And then finally, staying adaptable. So this could be as simple as having open-ended questions on our questionnaires and digging into the detail of what the interviewee is most knowledgeable about. But it can also be about having an open schedule during data collection. And if we find that we have answered a question or that a particular policy looks like it might not be viable in a country, that we will deprioritize that area of work and make sure we're fully prioritizing, fully prioritizing getting information that's actually relevant to the policymakers, so that in turn, this information can inform the next stage of policy design. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And I think, your conclusion on data collection really ties with what Michaela said about, the importance of doing tailored solution in countries, even though we have a system and we know what the needs are, but then each reality is different, and it starts with knowing the situation and accurate data. And we now have an online speaker, Ben Savonen, Senior Manager for Partnership for Battery Action, and he will be introducing the battery index and country pilots. Ben, you have 8 minutes. The floor is yours, and we will cut you after the 8 minutes. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'm Ben Savonen with the Partnership for Battery Action, or PB Action for short. We are a young nonprofit that, like Labry, is solely focused on trying to address the ULAB challenge globally. And I'd like to introduce you today to kind of our first major project, which is the Battery Index, which is our work to try to map the global ULAB recycling ecosystem and bring some transparency to an industry that many of us are currently not able to understand or map very well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. So I want to start on a note of optimism. Solving unsafe recycling is a very tractable problem. Lead acid batteries and the recycling of them do carry some real inherent hazards, but we know that recycling of them can be done safely. We see that in most high-income countries, places where recycling is often safe and quite profitable. And we also see some exemplary facilities in a lot of LMICs that are recycling very safely too. But recycling can also look very different in many places. And critically, it's not just the informal sector, even though we understand how dangerous that is. Even formal facilities, recycling facilities that are licensed, that are known to the government, that are trading on a global market, are frequently operating in a manner that would be considered unsafe by global standards. And these are some photos for some of our recent trips where we visited a number of these, several such facilities. Each of these were licensed, each of these were being regulated by the relevant regulators, but they also had some blatant safety violations that put workers and surrounding communities at risk. And these are often coming from countries that already have some existing standards and operating procedures in place. So while strong policy and understanding is incredibly important, it is only one part of the equation. Next slide, please. So this is where PB Action comes in. Our goal is to eliminate most of the world's unsafe recycling by 2040. An ambitious goal that we're all in this room working collectively towards, but this is the target that we're setting for ourselves. And we believe that the lesson here that we can be able to pattern off of is something that may be a little bit counterintuitive. We believe that safer recycling is going to have to come down to fewer, safer recyclers. When a market has too many players, they fall into a race to the bottom, competing for the same feedstock and materials, often cutting corners on safety to survive, as Labrie was sharing with us. We've seen from some countries, though, that have been able to make the recycling industry much safer, like the US and China, that the path to safer recycling comes down to consolidation, consolidating around the right recyclers. And we've seen a number of demonstrations across this globally where this tends to be the trend of how we get there. Fewer, safer recyclers. So we need fewer recyclers, and we need the ones who are operating most safely to remain in the market. And this can happen in two ways. One is through regulatory enforcement, right? Regulators come in and they're able to push the unsafe operators out. And as this week reminds us, the policy for keeping everything clear and transparent in a way that is actionable is very critical. But the enforcement will always be carried out at a local level, and it requires regulators who are both well-informed and motivated to act with good data on their local market. But secondly, we also believe because this is an economics problem, we need a market environment that rewards safer recycling. We need a carrot alongside the stick that regulation brings. And so we want to be able to make it so that these recyclers can have being more safe as the better business decision. And this is where PB Action is focused. We're trying to find new business opportunities, new sources of finance, and new sources of investment for recyclers who are trying to operate more responsibly. Next slide, please. So this is just a mock-up, but both of these levers, the carrot and the stick, depend on one thing. We need to know which facilities are recycling well and which are not. And for the informal sector, the first challenge is just finding these recyclers. But for the formal sector, we know where they're operating. Again, they're licensed and registered. We can find these facilities. But there's not yet really been a systematic assessment of their health and environmental impacts on a global level. And this is what our battery index pilot is currently seeking to fill. The Battery Index is a tiered global empirical database of recycling facilities, capturing how well a facility performs against global operating standards, but also the real impacts that it's having on its community. We use a tiered system rather than a simple pass-fail because facilities do exist on a spectrum based on the market they're in, and many of them are working to actively improve. That information in one place can be quite useful for a number of different audiences who want to be able to come in and support those players who are working towards improving. This could be investors. This could be buyers of lead globally who want to be able to source responsibly. This could be regulators who want to benchmark their local progress against some perhaps competitors in their region, or for the recyclers themselves to be able to assess how their progress is coming along. We think that right now competition is currently driving quality and safety to the bottom, but we want to be able to use the battery index to instead make that a race to the top so that the competitive forces are encouraging everyone to be more safe. Next slide, please. And so our assessment right now rests on 4 pillars. The first is a plant inspection, evaluating whether pollution controls are present and functioning effectively and are measured against some standard operating procedures for environmentally sound recycling that have been implemented in several places already. And at the same time, they've been able to be informed by several other frameworks that I'm sure that have been discussed in the last few days here. The other three pillars, though, are less focused on how things are being operated and much more so on the impacts. We measure soil lead concentration to kind of give us a historical record. How much lead has accumulated around the facility over time? We're looking at air quality because that tells us what is currently the emissions and lead being released in the atmosphere right now today. And as we know, air emissions are at least broadly understood to be one of the big sources of lead getting into the community. And then finally, we're looking to do blood lead level concentrations strategically with people working both inside the facility and near the facility to create a real snapshot of what are the health effects on the community. Next slide, please. So we're still in the pilot phase, and we're still collecting data. Our first pilot work has been in Ghana, but as we're collecting data, it is confirming that a lot of these facilities, while performing well and aspiring to perform well, we're still seeing what are projected to be health and environmental impacts in the communities around them. As we overlay some of our early findings on soil and air, we can see that the communities are most likely being affected on some level. And while we haven't completed testing, and these are still projections, the scale is potentially quite significant. And we see that there's certainly a lot of work to be done, even for those facilities that are on their way to improvement. And so we're very excited to work with local partners to be able to take this data to help be able to elevate the state of the local industry and bring in new forms of support. This is early work now, but we're excited to be scaling this work to other countries in West Africa and then beyond in the coming months. Last slide, please. So where are we going from here? Our three priorities. First, we want to continue to improve our methodology, making the assessment more reliable and robust and streamlined as our data set grows. Secondly, we're looking to continue to build partnerships. We have a number of key countries queued up, but this work has to be locally owned. And so we're always looking for partners at the international and local level that we can work with. PB Action is starting the battery index, but we cannot and should not scale it alone ourselves. And then finally, we're looking to develop new interventions and different financial instruments and rewards that can be able to support those higher tier facilities and those facilities that are looking to improve in the years to come. So if any of that resonates with you, we'd love to collaborate, whether it's contributing data, helping us to build consensus, or bringing in new sources of finance. We very much welcome the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. And I guess very interesting, and we will all get in touch with you to see how we can enlarge the scope of work and produce more useful data. And now we have another online presenter, which I'm very proud to present. Is the director of the BCRC of Argentina, and also very proud to say that he's GAHP board member, and is Alberto Santos Capra. So he will drive us through the digital battery passport and the pilot experience from Argentina. Thank you, Alberto. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Maria Paola, and good evening for everyone. I'm very sorry not being here. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution and for the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention for organization of this really interesting and very relevant meeting. So if you can go on my presentation, I have some slides to share. First of all, I want to say that we are a network of regional centers. We are located in South America, in Argentina. As Maria Paola said, I'm the director of the BRC Argentina. So next slide, please. So you can go with the next slide. We help countries in the chemical waste agenda. We are helping with countries in South American region, especially. So regarding the batteries, I would like to say that next slide, please. I wanted to talk about traceability. This is very relevant topic because in the European Union, there are regulations that is into force. There are some targets regarding with the European Green Deal that it's in support of the neutrality goals of the European climate law. And there are some key compliance obligations now active since this year. So as milestones, we have some regulation regarding covered selective vehicle, light means of transport, industrial, portable and starting light and ignition batteries. This is related as well with the declaration mandatory of carbon footprint, supply chain due diligence for some metals like cobalt, lithium, graphite and nickel. And this is all related with the general registry of passport, digital passport products, that will be open in the European Union next month. Next slide, please. So everything has to do with, for the moment, of the European Union regulation with the digital passport product, that it would be mandatory for electric vehicles, as I said before. So there will be DDG obligations next year and some targets of recovery of central metals. So there are quite a lot of different initiatives and programs that are being developed around the world, but especially in developed countries. One of the ones that I want to highlight is the Circular Interoperability of Resource Passport. This is named as well as CIRPAS project that is funded for the European Union, as is regarding of the interoperability testing across different sectors, including lead-acid batteries. So all of the things is related as well with the Global Battery Alliance, and UNEP is involved, and I will say in my last slide. But what's going on around the world, and especially in other regions? So next slide, please. I wanted to take you from here, this project that we have developed with the PACE, which is a partnership of action of computing equipment. It's called PACE2 in the frame of the partnership of the Basel Convention. So we present a project to be implemented in Uruguay about digital product passport for lead-acid batteries. So the objective is to design and implement a digital product information system based on a digital product passport, approaching to improve the traceability and environmental self-management of ULABs, supporting circular economy strategies. So in the next step we are applying is to establish the necessary arrangement and adjustment for the implementation of the pilot project as subsequent phases, including the validation of one proposed digital passport information system or digital product passport approach and its applicability across relevant stakeholders, not only use lead-acid batteries, but other batteries as well, and other batteries in other sectors, last in IT. Next slide, please. So the project has main activities and expected outcomes: assessment of the current regulatory framework regulation in Uruguay, and existing information flows, identification of the key stakeholder involved through the battery life cycle, definition of the information requirement and data structure for DPPs, development of traceability approach linking battery information with collection, transport and treatment stages, and design and implement a pilot system, including evaluation of interoperability and potential replication. What are the expected outcomes? Improve availability of reliable information through the battery life cycle, enhance traceability, what is very relevant to lead-acid batteries, and support the extensive producer responsibility that applies in Uruguay schemes and environmental self-management. And then we will try to do a replicable approach in other countries in the region. So next slide. I will mention that these activities is in the frame of as well an initiative of UNEP and several other stakeholders like UNIDO, ITU, and other sectors. This is this fourth circular economy initiative that promotes the use of digital technologies to enable circular economy models through improved information exchange, transparency, and collaboration. The key objective is advance the development of this digital products information system. There are a general framework that is being discussed, and there were some consultations last year. They were done. It was done one in Brasilia, and this year it will be in Africa. The support interoperability and data exchange across the value chains, enable access to reliable product information through the life cycle, and facilitate the transition from linear to circular economy models. So the relevance of this implementation is that this initiative provides global perspective on how digital infrastructure can support traceability, resource efficiency, and circular across different sectors. So our pilot project as well is in the frame of this initiative, and I think that this is the last one. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Alberto, and I think your pilot project is in Argentina and Latin America, but could be very relevant in many other parts of the world, and it brings together important aspects that we have been hearing and putting together through the various presentations. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Lilian Corra, who is Senior Advisor for the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, and will be focusing her presentation on highly polluted plastics and informal lead pollution from ULAB management. Thank you, Lilian. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. In our work on the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution at the country level and regional level in the different regions, and also in the collaboration in the review of the different tools of UNEP as the guidelines and other documents, we notice that there are gaps. Sometimes are technical gaps where there is information, but we have to collect this information and put it in a way to transform the technical information in a decision-making tool. Not only, as I said, for the governments, but also for the private sector, and also in the different technical discussions that we have under this umbrella of UN. So in this case, we prepare a document that is in our website, a leaflet, on the lead contained in the plastics of the cases of the used lead-acid batteries, because we saw that it's an issue that has little attention in the different levels, not because it is unknown, it is because it is not well understood. And sometimes we found the barriers why this is not a problem that can be solved. Next, I can do that, or next slide, please. Yes, okay, thank you very much. So we know that the material, the propylene, is used in the cases, another part, but mainly in the cases of the lead-acid batteries, and that we have residues of different kind of residues of lead in the initial raw material that comes from the ULABs, and that this can be from 900 parts per million to 10,000 parts per million, and also there are reports of higher concentrations. And this is after the initial removal. This is the one. Yes. So we have a different analysis depending the area that we consult. For example, the industrial goal is the ultimate goal of the formal recycle is to reduce lead content to a level safe for introducing the plastic into the wider recycling market. This is what happened in many countries. Instead, we have the WHO position that says that no safe level of exposure to lead has been identified. So what is the safe level that we have to, where we have to set the limit to introduce it in the recycled market? So here we have the different options that we have. That is the starting point, 900 to 10,000. And then after achieved treatment through formal sorting, washing, and decontamination, that is the usual treatment that we have in many regions and countries, we reach the limit in general of 200 parts per million, while the strict gap required for consumer goods to introduce the plastic from consumer goods and packaging, for example, and others, consumer goods, is 100 parts per million. So we have here an issue. So the 100, this is what we call the 100 parts per million regulatory wall. And so we want to use these plastics. We have to be sure that this, in consumer goods, in contact with people, we have to be sure that we are reaching this limit. And if it fails, if we fail to reach the limit, the plastic cannot legally interface with human contact markers, and a high purity solvent treatment is mandatory to cross this line. So here we have a technical issue that we have to consider when we go to the analysis of the technical standards. And here is a very simple image, where you can see that we can reach 200 part per millions applying mechanicals and aqueous wash. And if we want to reach 100 part per millions or less, to introduce it in another chain in contact with humans or human consumed products, we have to apply a different chemical purification. So what is the difference and why we have a problem here? The mechanical is, the capital investment for the mechanical is lower, the operating cost is also low, and the waste management is simple under the mechanical aqueous wash. While in the advanced solvent chemical purification, the capital investment is higher, the operating cost also is higher, and the waste management is complex. So here is a graphic where you can see that it is easier to reach 200 part per millions concentration in the plastic at the end of the mechanical and wash procedures. And if we want to reach 100 part per millions, we have the cost of the decontamination treatment is much higher. And then we cannot compete with the price of the virgin plastics polymers, no? That's the central problem here. So this is the last one slide. And so we have to pay attention to the regulatory level, that we are very clear, and many speakers have been stating the same, that without a strong regulatory pressure or subsidies, the open loop consumer market for ULAP's plastic will remain economically blocked. And the global technical guidelines that we have to pay attention is that for comprehensive overviews of environmentally sound management, stakeholders must align with UNEP, that is the Basel Convention guidelines, and with WHO framework. So we have to pay attention, because in what is happening in the real life is that most of this plastic with 200 part per millions goes to the stream of the recycling plastics, and in the fact we are not sure where it is going to find them. So that's my last. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. You used 7 minutes. Well done. So I think very technical presentation, but very key to see how we can reuse the plastic from contaminated case batteries and reuse in various supply chains. So I think we saw different aspects of this global issue, and we have a couple of minutes in case the audience has any question in the room or online. So the floor is open if we have questions. We have one. Do you have a microphone? Yes. Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for GAHP for organizing, and it's a very interesting topic. Unfortunately, I'm not closely working with this issue, but it is very important for the country, Tajikistan. I'm from Tajikistan, delegate. My name is Umijon Ulugov. I represent National Stockholm Center. In future, it is going to be BRS, the same as the Secretariat. That's why this topic will be very interesting for me. So regarding the lead and ULAP batteries in Tajikistan, we made interesting approach. We ban export of lead, which was produced in Tajikistan ULABs. So it now make a problem for us, because we can say that illegal exporting process started. That's why we need to produce appropriate legislation regulating some issues with this issue. And one question, very technical question. You are washing the plastic with water, yeah, I suppose?
I am a medical doctor. I know the technique because we discussed this technique under the Basel Convention review of the guidelines, but specifically the content of the water, if it is only water or water containing other chemicals, I cannot respond to that. Okay. So technically, I'm not the person to answer this.
In this case, it's clear. In this case, I suppose my country needs some educational, maybe technical advices in order to follow up in the appropriate way. Now we are going to conduct research to determine my lead concentration in soil. So in order to make decisions, legal decisions. So if somebody can assist us to provide any technical support to answer the questions, it will be good for us. Thank you.
Issue have been raised in the guidelines that the Basel Convention is preparing at the review of the new guidelines on ULABs. And there was a confrontation, you may say, between these two issues. How much is the tolerance to continue recycling, and how complex is the technique, or how expensive is the technique? But these techniques are described in the new guidelines, and you will be able to reach this information when the guidelines are presented in November.
Okay, good evening. My name is Margaret Beslow, and I'm from Liberia in West Africa. I want to say thanks to the presenter for this information that we have. And I am interested seriously because, especially in West Africa, waste management is a serious problem already. And we all know the effects of lead on human and the environment. And I am concerned because with the poor waste management system, especially in our country also, we have waste in the wrong places, especially in wetlands. And you all know that we have food we harvest from the wetlands. So it's like the lead or whatever the contents of the waste is, comes right back to us. And I am concerned if, because I heard that with the various presenters, that there are support for governments, both for policy also, and some technical assistance. And I just wanted to understand if that can be forwarded for Liberia, if that's possible, from any of the speakers, because I am seriously concerned. We have people there dealing with batteries, and child labor is also something that we're looking at, because we have children dealing with these batteries also. And where's the end of this battery, the substances, where do they end up? They end up in our environment. So I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I think it's a very good question, and I can tell from UNEP's side, we are doing our best to continue find additional financial resources to support countries around the world. It's part of our daily work. Currently, there is we have SMILE initiative in the ECOWAS countries, and I think that could be something that you can benefit from, at least in terms of strengthening your technical capacity. This is part of my daily work in UNEP, and I'm also doing my best to continue fundraising, and I will keep this in mind for for potential other initiatives that we may have in the coming future, because I think how should I say, it takes a village, right, to deal with the issue. And also this event today, where we brought all these partners, that each of them, they are covering different aspects, right, that are dealing with the lead pollution and exposure management, right? I think what I'm also trying to build is to bring us all together and to share this burden, right? Because, for example, each of us come with a different strength. UNEP may have the policy and regulatory strength because it's part of our core mandate, but we see these other partners here, LABRI, but GAHP, of course, and the PB Action colleague, which also are very active and bring and address different aspects of the problem. So I think part of our role as UNEP is also to bring all these actors together and understand who is doing what and where. And okay, if there are, how should I say, intervention of one of us in one country, how then can others come up and complement those, right? So reduce this fragmentation also at this level, right? Because I think it's a problem that needs to be dealt by coming together. It cannot be done by a single actor in the space. So I think that is crucial. But thank you so much for raising this and rest assured that from our end we are doing continuous fundraising to provide our support to countries, and we serve you. So that is the idea here. Thank you.
If there are donors in the room or online, they're welcome to contact us. And I think, so yes, continue to fundraise. We have another question in the room, please.
Thank you so much. I'll try to make it very short because we are over time, right? My name is Kevin Cassi, and I'm representing a company called Black Forest Solutions. And we are technical advisors for hazardous waste in the Global South. And we also have a department which does hazardous waste reverse logistics back to Europe under Basel Convention. So that's why all this topic is super interesting. And thank you also to the panel. It was very interesting. I just would like to add one small point or advertise for that, if I may, which is that when we talk about the carrot and stick for the informal sector working on hazardous or non-hazardous waste, our experience is from the field, we work in more than 60 countries, that this doesn't work really. No? Enforcement or regulations, when we bring regulations into a country or policies, they only work as far as the enforcement goes. Because the informal sector will always find a way, if they don't have other incentives, to bypass regulations or so if there's no enforcement. And the enforcement in what we saw in many countries is usually very tricky if there's no big efforts to bring this enforcement into life, right? There are also other experiences, for example, in Jordan, where this enforcement for hazardous waste went quite well, but mostly what we see, it's tricky. So what we would advertise for, or at least we could maybe add this to the topics, to think more about the carrot for the informal sector, because when we just try to shut down the informal sector, like it was tried in Ghana, for example, at Akbok Bloshi, at the WEEE site, then we see many negative implications, and in the end, the informal sector will find another way. So, and this is my last point, our suggestion is just that the informal sector, especially when it comes to hazardous waste, should be empowered, because when we talk to these actors, which we work with daily, no one wants to be poisoned, and no one wants that their children are poisoned or their environment is poisoned. But mostly either there's economic pressure, or also there's not the knowledge at these actors how to do it right. And this is what we would like to highlight.
Thank you. I think you bring a very important point. Policies are not effective without enforcement, and enforcement is necessary to, of course, have responsible business in place. And we know that many issues comes out of necessity, and lead is, I mean, very precious. So of course, it's an economic driver for people. If I don't know if we have any other question, maybe they want to also comment, I guess.
I would like to add to your point. I think when we talk about informal sector, it's a social issue as well, because those people are doing that to gain their living, daily bread, right? And I think it's not enough to come up with environmental type of solutions or regulatory frameworks, but you need to bring in the social aspect of it, for which you need solutions. And that's why I was saying that this is a multi-sectoral type of intervention that needs to happen. It's not only environment. You have, of course, health, but you have also all the social aspects, like how do we reconvert what these people are doing into something that is formalized and that they can continue or to be trained and continue to provide for their families, right? Switching to more sustainable way of doing this job, right? And most of the time, I think there is an oversight or you overlook the social aspect of it. And I think it's an element that should be brought in, and solution need to be we need to find solution, of course, by together with the government representatives. What are the solutions for these people? Can they be trained? Who can support reconversions of these people that are doing this job each and every day, just to provide for their families, not just because they want to pollute the planet. So they need a solution. Otherwise, this will continue to, as you said, they will find ways to continue doing it if they have no alternatives to that. So I see a hand there.
I guess Lilian wanted to comment before we open another question.
Well, thank you, and sorry. And I want to react to your your comment. In our experience, that there are not magical solutions. Sometimes enforcement for many countries or regions is impossible. So it is very important, the multi-stakeholder understanding and working together. Sometimes governments develop the policy or the framework or the enforcement only when the private sector is pushing, or when there is a social understanding of that. And the other thing is, enforcement is very difficult sometimes because we have to consider the context where we are enforcing. We discussed with Maria Paola, for example, that a border of a country like Brazil is very difficult to control. How you enforce this? Because you need a lot of money. So if you don't have an understanding and a cooperation of the private sector and a carrot for the private sector to cooperate, is very difficult. That's why this is a process that have to be driven at the national level and at the regional level. And it's more complex, even if it has a simple solution, it's more complex because we all have to agree in carrying an activity on to finish with this problem. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, and I think we can take the last question from the floor before we close, please.
Thank you so much. I think to appreciate all the presenters, the information is quite insightful. My name is Chris Mushawa from Zimbabwe. I'm the director responsible for environmental protection for Zimbabwe. So I interact with the issues that are being discussed quite a lot. But my view resonates with the last comment from the last speaker, to say the major problem across many countries is that the private sector, big companies who are manufacturing these batteries are free riding. Here we are seated thinking about getting money elsewhere to make sure that we protect or organize the informal sector in terms of the small businesses that they are doing. But you see that in the entire value chain, there's somebody who has made significant money and is not contributing anything in the value chain in terms of end of life recycling or reuse of these batteries. You know, I'm thinking that if policies are working well, our taxation framework should reflect our environmental management systems end game. So the entire value chain must be able to speak to that. There is no reason why we should be hunting for money elsewhere, because we want to deal with a product where somebody else has made money in the value chain. So I'm thinking the finance ministers, the ministries of finance, and so on. It's an entire ecosystems across the government structure that should be speaking the same language. The problem is that we have fragmentation in countries, regionally, and across the globe. Governments operate in silos. Minister of Finance deals with the whole budget of a country and does not speak to these things, and fail to tax appropriately for environmental protection. So I think these are some of the problems that we are having. And as environmental actors globally, we must be able to push very hard to make sure that each and every budget across the entire, countries, they reflect environmental management in terms of taxation. The same is what has happened, I think, to the healthy budgets, where you have a kind of a global position to say a certain percentage of the country budget should go towards health. I think the same should happen for environment. As long as we are not taxing for environmental goods and services, we will continue to talk about these things, because somebody is free riding. Somebody is not being held accountable. I submit, Madam Facilitator. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. I didn't understand the question, but your comment is well taken and very relevant. And I think everyone mentioned the importance of having a multi-stakeholder process, exactly, to respond to the needs you are saying. How can we bring Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, the public and private sector, the NGO, the academia, so that we look across the whole spectrum of supply chain, but also the social economic impact that these issues is creating. And it's very complex, but I think I agree with you that in addition to any seeds funds that, all of us can try to attract, the countries have the ultimate responsibility to be the driver, which is why it's so important to understand that this is going to create benefit for the country in itself, economic impact, and also health and environment benefits. So I think we want to have you as a champion, because, every country, must take this in their own hands, and I think is what we all agree on. And I think if we don't have any other question, and I think I should not take any other question, we can have concluding remarks for Obiola, if she wants to dedicate 1 minute, and then conclude this panel because we are over time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. All I just wanted to say is to again echo what the last comment from our colleague from Zimbabwe, and also Mihila's presentation. If you see a presentation, one of the basic solutions to deal with this is this integrated, holistic approach. Because from my experience, also coming from Nigerian government and working with chemicals and waste for over 20 years, until we established an integrated multi-stakeholder system where all the key stakeholders, we sit together. And so the Ministry of Finance is part of it. They know what the environment problems are. They're able to also, through the budgeting system, carry the environment burden into that, into that space. So what you said is very true, and that is what Miela also, adheres to, that this is really the bottom line. Until the key stakeholders are able to agree that this structure is the bottom line, is very difficult. We keep having this fragmented structure, and it's very challenging to really get to the solution at the end of the day. So I'll just end with this. Let's all go back and ensure that we're able to establish and push for this integrated, holistic infrastructure that is able to have all the key stakeholders sitting together and ensuring that we have action not just at the global level, but the action filters down to regional level and national level. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone, and I wish you all a very good evening. And I think the recording will be available on our website soon. Thank you.